Okay, so whenever you're ready, yep, go ahead.
Okay, you guys see the screen, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I studied the color system and applying UI, as in applying color to the UI. So let me start with the color system here. So the material design color system, it is mostly there to help you bring out the brand value. So it really emphasizes on where to add color and how much color and what intensity of color should you add to your UI to make it like stand out. So I have like a couple of notes for it. So about color usage and palettes, the material design color system helps you apply color to your UI in a meaningful way. And in this system, you select a primary and a secondary color to represent your brand. And variations of dark and light color can be also observed. So if I talk about the colors and the theming, so I would say that color themes are designed to be harmonious, ensure accessible text, and distinguish UI elements and surfaces from one another. So this is an example of a general template, and it shows a primary color here which has like the dark and light variants, and a secondary color which has its dark and light variants. So we mostly use like the primary color along with like accented secondary color to highlight and emphasize on the things that we want to stand out. And talking about the principles of color, I would say the major principle is hierarchy. So, color indicates which elements are interactive and how they relate to other elements and their level of prominence. And important elements should stand out the most. And legible, definitely. The text and important elements like icons, they should be legible enough. And that mostly depends on the color and the contrast. And the other one is expressive. So they show brand colors at memorable moments that reinforce the brand's identity and style. Sorry. Yeah. So talking about the color theme creation, there are like a couple of concepts based on the color theme creation. So I'll start with the first concept, that is the baseline material color theme. So this is a template that is originally being used by the material design, and it has a set of primary colors and secondary colors, background colors, and the error colors. So this is like a I would say it's a typical template, and it's mostly used for any sort of application or web design. Then primary color. So the primary color is the most frequently used color across the main applications. So if we talk about, let's say this case, so purple is the primary color that is being used most of the times and almost everywhere. So you talk about the target here, or let's say the conversion here. So everything on the application would have the darker and the lighter variants of the single primary color that we have. Then talking about secondary colors, so secondary colors are mostly used to make something stand out. So, for ways to accent and distinguish the product. So here I would say, if you look at this particular example, so the addition button here, it's of a secondary color and it stands out from the usual color of the application that was purple. So that is the reason why we mostly have secondary colors on our website or our applications. Then about typography and iconography colors. Um, the major concept here is the on color concept. So on colors are primarily applied to text and icons, and they're the colors that we can probably see to read something on the application. For example, on this blue bar, the purple bar here, we see analytics written and we see the hamburger menu. So these are white in color so that they could stand out so that we could read it. So these are the on colors. And weekly stats and marketing, all of these are also on colors. So most of the applications use black and white as their on colors because these are the colors that typically stand out on most of the colors. So generally, the most frequently used on colors are black and white. Then coming to accessible colors, I would actually come down to this particular node. So here you can see that there is a box and it has a tick mark on it. The tick mark varies with the color intensity in the background. So for example, when we see a darker primary color, then we have a white tick here. And when we see a lighter background color, we see a black tick here. So the tick mark depicts the color that should be used for the on, like the on, what was that? Sorry. Uh, the on colors. Yeah, like for typography. So you see here that when we use a lighter background, we have a black color text that depicts the typography. Then we have alternate colors. So alternate colors are basically when we want different things on an application to stand out. So I would actually like jump to this particular example here, which shows that, yellow color is being used on the onboarding. And we see that purple or this dark blue color is being used on the accounts color, and the pink color is mostly used for the courses. So one application has several colors, but all the different colors have a different agenda behind it, and there is a different usage of each color. So these colors, like for example, yellow would help us understand that we are on the onboarding page. So it would help us differentiate. So that is how we are able to use color to differentiate the different sections of an application. Then coming to the additional colors for data visualization, we see here in this particular example that we have like pink bar here, a green icon here, and we have like some blue and purple color used at graphs. So these are the colors that are mostly used again to stand out and help a user differentiate and distinguish that, how things work. So I actually give a better example here. So in one academy, we can see that, this yellow line here, this orangish yellow line here, this is exactly what the additional color for data visualization is, the green arrows here. So something that helps us to better visualize something is basically, adding contrast and using different types of colors, especially that stands out on our backgrounds. So this is like a very general overview about the color themes and yeah, the color system. And now I would jump to the
Oh, actually, Anviksha, I think Alex had an example.
okay.
I don't know if this is a good time for Alex if you want to talk about your example. Maybe Anviksha, you can travel to that node.
Okay.
The expressive.
I would need some help to get to the node. Could I search it?
It's
Yeah, Alex.
It's under. I put it as a relational node to the expressive one that you made. I don't know if you named it. I'm trying to see.
It's the node under alternative colors or data visualization.
Like the principles of color usage and palettes. Color theming, I think? No, not color theming. How you had expressive, hierarchical, and legible. Those
they were the principles here.
Yeah, under expressive.
Oh, okay.
Here's an example.
Okay.
And I just talked about Outlook, Microsoft's email service, and how they have like, and even not just even on for Outlook, but anything if you use their OneDrive or any other projects, they always have this like predominant blue. You can see with the create a new message button, and then anytime that you click on the bottom navigation bar, it has that blue. So it was just a small example, but it just
That's
reminded
right.
me of that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. And Alex, did you also have a question about something else when Anviksha was talking?
It's kind of, I thought it was interesting when they talk about accessibility, and then they don't necessarily mention, I feel like the biggest thing to me that I thought of was like color blindness, like people that have are
I think
colorblind.
so I actually did a course the previous semester, and I feel that the contrast here with the black color and the white color is somewhat related to color blindness. I feel, I
Hmm.
mean, this is what I perceive, that the background is comparatively darker than the foreground. So if probably we have a white tick mark here, then we assume that it would be for people who are colorblind as well. Like it should work for people who are colorblind as well.
Okay.
But we can definitely dig in deeper and see that whether it really works, and like what are the basic criteria for color-blinded design. So we could definitely think about it and study more.
Hmm.
Good question. Okay, cool. Yeah. And what's your next section?
The next section is applying color to UI.
Okay.
Yeah, so I basically talk about the usage, top and bottom app bars, and the background. So usage, sorry. So usage also talks about three major principles here. And the first principle here is consistent, that we prefer using color that is consistent throughout the application or the website. For example, Alex just mentioned about the blue color in there. So it just helps a person, resonate and just align with the brand's identity and just be able to navigate better. And distinct is, the color should create distinction between elements with sufficient contrast between them. I feel that this could be related to accessibility, that everything that we add on the application should be accessible and distinguishable by all the users that use that particular app or website. And then intentional, so colors should be applied purposefully, as it can convey meaning in multiple ways, such as relationships between elements and degrees of hierarchy. So these are the basic principles that we keep in mind when we talk about the usage of colors. And for the top and bottom app bars, I would actually, explain it through the examples here. So as we can see, the application, like everyone, when we use an application in our phone, we have a top bar of the application, and then we have a system bar. So the system bar has our battery and notifications. So whenever we use any application on our phone, so most of the times the system bar is of a slightly darker color when you compare it from your phone's top bar. So this is something that most of the applications in today's date would be, following. So you could actually take your phone and look at it right now, and you would see that if probably, your app's primary color is green, then your system bar would be a darker green. So that was a very it just helps to visualize better. And the difference between app bars and other surfaces. So here we can see that the floating button, like the floating action button on this particular page, is of a different color. So this again stands out and pops out for anyone to use it. So the main activity on this particular page is to edit content and add content. So you could just click on the main button and do the needful. So you could probably use a contrasting color to add and emphasize on a particular activity that you want to focus on. And talking about bottom up bars and floating action buttons. So if in case we do not have different colors here, so we use a slight shadow here. So if I zoom in, I'm sure like you would be able to see it. So there's a slight shadow which just helps to distinguish between the two different buttons. Then talking about blending an app bar with the background. So I think we have examples here. So we see here that the main top bar and the application, they're both white in color. And we have like a slight line here, which is a sort of shadow of the top bar on the main application area, which helps us distinguish between the top bar and the application. So it might happen that the moment when you land on the main page of the application, you might not have that line, but when you scroll through it, you would have that line there to distinguish, because that is something that is being fixed to your phone's phone screen. So this would just help you read through the content easily. And I think yeah, I think this just talks about the different color, like yellow color is highlighted here and it just stands out from the regular blue. And the last part here is the backdrop color. So the backdrop has a front and back layer, and to distinguish between these two layers, the baseline back layer is your primary color and the baseline front is white. So as you can see here, like whatever the background is the primary color, and the content that we have used to depict our information on the screen is of a contrasting color, that's white. And then we even have secondary color that is being used to highlight what we really want to highlight on this particular page. So this was like a broad overview of different sections and segments related to the color system. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Before you stop sharing your screen, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Aman.
I think you're doing great. Every week, I really enjoy your presentation. You are deeply going through a specific topic. You focus on only one topic, and your notes are very helpful, especially
Thank
the
you.
hierarchical structure. I feel like I personally, whenever I need to just find something, review any of these things that you have added, instead of going through documentation, I prefer to go through this hierarchical structure of your notes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Man. And does anyone have any questions about the content in here? Okay, I think I stop sharing.
All right, good job. Let's see. Next we have Kaeli. Do you want to go or?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm presenting today about the IDEO human-centered design process. As we head more towards design-focused meetings, this is a process I think we should be using. It's what we used, even if not intentionally, over the summer when we were doing the light mode redesign. IDEO is a design firm, and they have a lot of really interesting content and information and research just on design, the best ways to do it. So this is their human-centered design process. So as you can see with this image here, it is a continuous process. You start with observation, and then you continue all the way through, and then implementation, and then you continue back to observation. It never ends, which I think is one of the most important parts of this design process. But I can go through each of the parts and share a little bit about them. So first is observation. So it's the first step when you first start the process, so that you can understand users, what's going on as they use the product that you're trying to present, any experiences that they're having. And at this point, you shouldn't be coming in with any assumptions about a user. Most important part of this is keeping an open mind, and actually trying to understand users' experiences. So that's the stage we're in right now as we're using Oneacademy as a research platform. We're coming at it from the perspective of the users, and our observation of how we're using Oneacademy and how Oneacademy works as we use it, is the way that we are observing the users in this first stage, which is also what we did for light mode design. After observation comes ideation. So that's about determining solutions to problems that you find through observation. So this should be focused on those needs and desires that you found through that observation process, and addressing the pain points that you determined through that. So again, with our light mode design, Aman let us know that a lot of users were asking for a design that they could use in brighter settings, like outside. They were all asking for a light mode version of Oneacademy, and through that observation of user needs, we began to determine that a light mode was required for Oneacademy. The next step is rapid prototyping. So this is extremely rapid. The point of this is to put out a prototype that there's not too much commitment into this prototype, because things are going to need to change after this first prototype. And the point is to get user feedback at this point, before you're too committed, so that you can quickly and easily change the design direction once you have that feedback. So the point of this, you should not be creating the perfect solution to the problem yet. The point is to get quick and easy user feedback from this. We didn't do that for light mode design, seeing as Oneacademy had already been completely built. But that is definitely important when it comes to most other types of user-centered design, especially when you're creating a new product. The next step is user feedback. So again, that's coming through from the rapid prototyping. Like I just talked about, it's important to get user feedback in order to understand how they feel about the design and if it's actually going to address these pain points that they have. Obviously, with our team, it's hard for us to reach users such as like the Oneacademy research, or not Oneacademy researchers, COVID-19 researchers, just because they are highly focused on what they're researching and don't have much time to be taking our surveys or doing user interviews with us. So most of our user feedback is going to be coming from within our team. So it's really important that all of us have an understanding of Oneacademy from a user perspective, so that we can be giving this feedback. But the next step would be iteration. So this is a constant making changes and adapting to this user feedback, going back and forth between prototyping, feedback, and iteration, making sure that the design is getting better and better each time before it is implemented. This again relies a lot on that user feedback. Again, making it a user-centered design process is extremely important. And then the next step is implementation, or back to iteration. When we were doing the light mode design, we had quite a few iterations, whether it was for the background. Oh, I have an example. You can see here that, let me see if I can zoom in. You can see here that we had multiple iterations, design 1, 2, 3, 4, different of the dark overlays, of the toggle buttons. We had a lot of different tries on this, and that's most important so that you can see different developments and make those minor adjustments before you move on to implementation. Sorry, I lost it. Give me a second. Okay. Finally, you have implementation. So once that's been finalized, it feels fully fine-tuned, you can move on to this implementation step. But remember that this is a circular process. So once there has been implementation, you should continue to observe users and continue to make sure that you are creating design that is user-centered and addressing those pain points that users might have. Any questions?
This was great as well. So the only point I wanted to mention is that so currently we, as we discussed in the other meeting with you and Shannon, it is possible for us to start interviewing the users of One Academy and surveying them. So we're just preparing for it.
Yeah, we'll go over that too at today's meeting. It's on the agenda, so we can talk about that too. Thanks, Kaeli. Okay, so I guess I will share my screen now. Give me a sec. Okay, so I will be going over a few articles from Nielsen Norman Group. Nielsen Norman Group is a UX research and consulting firm, and they have a lot of great articles on user experience, and I will be going over, oops.
So when that happens, click that double-headed arrow, or you can just minimize and maximize in a lot of them.
Okay, yeah.
So that is a bug that we're working on right now. The workaround for now is just to click that double-headed arrow next to like 6 days ago or 10 hours ago or whatever it is.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. So
okay.
Whenever nodes overlap, you need to just click that button.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So I will be going over 10 usability heuristics for user interface design, as well as the first heuristic. I should already have this open. Let me see. Yes, this one. I have to do that first. Okay, so these are the 10 usability heuristics. This is an article that was written by Jacob Nielsen, and I will go over each one really quick. So the first one is called visibility of system status. And this simply says that the system should always keep users informed about what's going on with appropriate feedback and within a reasonable time, so that the user is aware of what's going on in the system and they're not confused. If something happens and they don't know what that means, they should always be at least informed. If something is going wrong, they should be told. If they incorrectly or accidentally click something. And this is also, a lot of these heuristics relate to each other, so these examples might overlap, but yeah, if they click on something, they should be told what happens when they do an action, and that way they can at least be aware whether they did something wrong or they did something right, if that makes sense. So that is visibility of system status. Next, we have match between system and the real world. So the second heuristic, this simply says that the language you use in your system or application should work with the real world or make sense to users within the real world, rather than using phrases that are more system oriented. For example, programming, if a programmer thinks, they put an error message that says something more specific to what is happening behind the scenes in terms of programming, then the user sees that, they won't really know what that means because they don't see what's happening behind the scenes. They don't understand the programming that's going into it. So they would need a message that makes more sense to them in terms of the surface level interaction that they see. So yeah, and that includes following sort of conventions, maybe phrases that people are used to seeing and equating with certain system actions or reactions. Heuristic number 3 is user control and freedom. So you want to try in your system to give the user as much control and freedom as you can so that they don't feel stuck doing things a certain way. They should be able to manipulate things the way that they want to as much as possible. And this does depend on the system you're creating and what your goals are with that system. But generally, you want to try to allow the user to be able to manipulate the application that they're interacting with the way that they see fit so that they feel comfortable interacting with that system. And this says to definitely support undo and redo. So that includes when users click something by accident or they did something previously that they want to do again. This is like kind of a shortcut, I think, for redo. So yes, that is heuristic 3. Number 4 is consistency and standards. So this just says that you should try to be consistent throughout your system. And consistency, what that does is actually help the user get used to the standards that you have on the site, and that actually contributes to their overall understanding of what's going on, because if you are consistent with the way that you use certain phrases or certain colors and elements, they have a better chance of understanding the different states that they might be in while using that application and be less confused. You don't want your users to be confused, obviously. So yeah, being consistent is a good rule. Number 5, error prevention. So obviously the user can often, errors happen and they can accidentally click things all the time, but it's even better to try to design your system in a way that prevents it from being possible to even create that error in the first place. So you want to, as much as possible, try to eliminate any possibility for errors that the user might make. And I actually find this interesting because, in terms of when you talk about trying to give the user more control and freedom, a lot of these heuristics you actually have to balance with other heuristics. So you can try to give the user as much control and freedom as possible, but you also want to make it not possible for them to perform errors. So you might have to limit certain functions so that they don't accidentally fall into an error state. Yeah. Heuristic 6 is called recognition rather than recall. And this is based on the idea of working memory, and a person's working memory load is actually limited. So you want to try to, in your system, not force the user to remember things from past states in order to complete actions that they're currently on. They should be able to see basically all the information that they need to complete a task at the exact moment that they need it. So while they're performing something, if they're trying to, let's say, they're trying to check out on a site, if they're not able to see all of their checkout information as they're, about to hit that final submit button or whatever, that can definitely make it difficult for the user to remember what they might have forgotten what they just ordered or something. That's just one example, but yeah, you want to try and give the user all the information they need at the time that they need it. Number 7 is flexibility and efficiency of use. So this says the system should cater to both inexperienced as well as experienced users. And they use the term accelerators. So that means that you should try to incorporate something in your system where a user who is more, experienced, has used this site more, can kind of develop shortcuts to do certain actions that they do frequently or all the time. And, whereas an inexperienced user might come on and not know exactly how to do everything yet, they might not be as familiar with the site. They might still be exploring and understanding how it works, and that's okay. And they should be able to navigate their way through the site just as well as an experienced user. And I think this mostly means that for experienced users, they might get tired of having to go through certain processes if they're longer, like let's say it's multiple clicks in order to complete a task. They might prefer a way to complete that task more quickly with fewer clicks. So yeah, something to think about for designing your system as well. Number 8 is aesthetic and minimalist design. And this says that, I love this quote. It says, every extra unit of information in a dialogue competes with the relevant units of information and diminishes the relative visibility. So you have to really make sure that the information that you are presenting to the user, or that is visible at any given time, is exactly what they need to see. And you don't want to add things that maybe it might be nice to have there, but if it competes with things that are actually crucial, that need to be there, then it might actually distract and confuse the user more than necessary. Number 9 says, help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. So again, this has to do with kind of error prevention and stuff. So obviously you might not be able to prevent every possible error that a user could make. So you want to, when errors do happen, you have to be able to give feedback. This goes back to visibility of system status, as well as kind of being able to use language that works with the user so they can understand when an error occurs. And again, it says how to recognize, diagnose, and recover from it. And lastly, when all else fails, you want to be able to have some sort of documentation so the user, if they're really stuck and confused, they can refer to this documentation to be able to figure out on their own how they can navigate the site and manipulate it, so that if all else fails, they should be able to complete a task with this and still be able to use the site how they want to. So that is the 10 usability heuristics. And many of you guys have probably, this might have been a review for you. I think I really like these. I think this is a really good review because what these really apply to kind of all UX design, really for any type of product. You know, it doesn't just have to be an application or a website. So yeah, are there any questions on the 10 usability heuristics? Okay, so I will close that one. And then I actually was just going to go over the first heuristic a little bit more in depth. So the first heuristic, again, is visibility of system status. Oh, I have to click this first. Okay, and I'll open them all at this point. Did it open them all? Okay. Okay, so part of visibility, the theory behind this heuristic has to do with the idea that knowledge is power. And this says that only by knowing what the current system status is can you change it, which is really just a very true statement. So the user can't reach their goal unless they're able to overcome what is described as 2 major UX gulfs. And they are the gulf of evaluation and the gulf of execution. And so they need to have enough information in order to overcome the gulf of evaluation, which just means they need to be able to evaluate the state that they're currently in order to understand how to move through it and how to interact with it. And eventually, so that's kind of step 1, I think, and then overcoming the goal of execution once they're able to evaluate their state is step 2. So yeah, I think the idea behind visibility of system status is to be able to help the user evaluate their current state. Another thing that goes along with visibility of system status is having appropriate feedback, and that includes, the language you're using, the timing, when you're giving it, and that all of that helps the user more understand when there's an error, or if there isn't an error, if they successfully performed a task. Let's see, yeah, and you can do this with various aspects like color changes. And the overall goal is to reduce uncertainty, and you should send confirmation to the user. So if they do succeed in performing a task, you need to let them know that as well. And communication like this creates trust. So when you correctly communicate with your user about what's going on and they are able to respond accordingly, then they do feel kind of more of a sense of trust with that system. They don't feel like they're lost. They don't feel like they've been confused or that things have been unnecessarily complicated. They feel like they have an understanding of, the mechanics of the system. And I think it also has to do with the system's brand. So you want to, if you're creating a completely new site like One Academy, part of your brand is kind of how you communicate with the user through the site and how you walk them through the site and how you help them understand this platform. So it has a lot to do with branding and trust. And yeah, the last part of this says that your system should communicate sort of what's happening behind the scenes, and that will hopefully compel users to action. I think this is best explained with an example. So when you're on a site and you're kind of shopping and they have, like if something's out of stock, they should indicate that, or when stock is low, but especially if it's out of stock, they should indicate that. And specifically when, when no items are left in stock, this really helps create trust because it can save your user effort from trying to add it to their cart or whatever. And maybe they add it to their cart and they go all the way through the actual checkout process and then they realize that it's sold out or something. They could become perhaps very frustrated and maybe upset because they got excited about it and then they can't actually purchase it. And when stock is low, and this is obviously specific to shopping online, so this doesn't relate to One Academy directly, but when stock is low, you should indicate that as well. And kind of an added benefit of that is that it prompts users to maybe purchase something because the stock is low, and that has to do with scarcity and social proof. Again, that doesn't really have to do with One Academy, but yeah, so this is kind of a more in-depth look at the visibility of system status heuristic. Are there any questions about this one? Okay.
I think this was a great presentation. I learned a lot, and I have a suggestion. So right now, the tag you're adding to these nodes is design science, right?
Right.
So I think it will be great if you also add 2 other tags, UX research and interaction design, because I feel like these would be helpful. These nodes would be helpful for the UX research team. Also, whoever is looking for like stuff about interaction design, these are extremely helpful.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did consider possibility of using different tags because a lot of this stuff is kind of interconnected. And actually, that's a good point. I will show you guys this because you might not have it up on your screen on One Academy, but there is this interaction design node here. And I actually was I was trying to round this out and add a few kind of child nodes and connect this, because this is really, if you can see, I added this picture here, it connects to all of these things. So yeah, if you guys, and again, this also has to do with kind of you guys working on One Academy as well, because we'd love for you guys to go in and kind of make sense of all of these different nodes and how they connect the relationships here and help make more sense of them, to help connect everything together and maybe edit some things. So we do want you guys to go in and edit these nodes too, so that we can improve the information here as best as possible. So yeah, again, if you guys want to add a tag for interaction design, you can tag this node here. And I'll actually just link that in the chat for you guys to reference if you ever need to. And then what was the other tag that you mentioned, Aman? Was it UX?
UX research.
Okay, because there should be that as well. We have user experience design.
I feel like user experience design is a better one.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
then this one right here, I think, is that one. I'll link that one as well.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so I think that concludes the presentations for today. So I will stop the recording.